Hey guys, welcome back. Hopefully at this point you've watched video number 1. You learned a little about some different types of printmaking. You watched a lino cut being made from start to finish. You learned about some artists that we're going to kind of compare ourselves to as we go along here, and then you also saw some student examples of the project. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to talk about how to finish up your drawing, some tips and tricks for that, how to get your drawing transferred to Linoleum, how to start cutting your linoleum, as well as some safety tips and tricks for the cutting tools themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about cleaning up. And that's going to be it for video number 2, so that you can get your drawings transferred and then start cutting everything. See you guys in class. So right now I'm working on my drawing for my linoleum print. You can see what I'm doing. I'm still kind of have some areas that are still just very roughly sketched out. But what I'm going to do is think ahead to when it's finally made into a linoleum block. How am I going to cut it to show all of my details? So what I'm doing right now is I'm darkening some outlines, and I'm trying to show everything in a way where I will remember what I need to cut and what I need to leave flat for printing. So everything that I'm shading black right now, they're going to be things that I don't cut. So anything that I'm leaving white are things that I'm going to chop out of the linoleum to print it. So keep that in mind. If you have areas that you want shaded, using straight lines like this is a good way to show a sort of gray color, even though you can only print in one color. Having those sort of lines, and if you remember back to hatching and cross hatching from 6th grade, you'll remember that having lines that are close together will produce sort of a gray tone, even though it's really only just different tones of black. The white being interspersed between those lines will make it look gray to your eye as you're looking at it. So I'll check back in a little bit after I'm finished with the drawing, and we'll talk about what to do next. So I'm a little bit further on my drawing now. You can see I have some areas where I'm going to have black right up against an outline, both here along the head of the wolf and also over here up against the tree. Now, if I want any of this to show up, or the difference between the black of the background and the black outline of the wolf, if I want that to show up, I need to leave a thin white line between the black and the object. I'm not going to do it in the case of the wolf. I think the shading on the top of the head will make it stand out fine from the black background. But one place I don't think it's going to work here is here up against the tree. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a thin white sort of border around the outer edge of it, so I remember to cut in that spot. Okay, so my drawing is done, and the next step is you've got to get yourself a piece of linoleum. This is what linoleum looks like. As you can see, it's a little bit smaller than our drawing, and that's because I wanted to force you guys into having a good composition. So what you're going to do is first get your piece of linoleum. It's going to be over by the sink. So let's head over there now. So when linoleum is made at the factory, when they cut it, it leaves a lot of dust on the outside of the linoleum, and that's going to make it tough for us to transfer our pencil drawings onto it. So linoleum will be on the right side of the sink over here. What you need to do is just take it and rinse it off. Really just need to wipe it with your hand underneath running water to get the dust off of it. Once that's done, you need to dry it thoroughly. So get enough paper towels and make sure that it's completely dry. Then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so at this point you've finished your drawing, and hopefully you've cleaned off some linoleum and dried it well. And now what needs to happen is we need to transfer the drawing to your linoleum. Now for mine, I've already transferred it and actually started cutting. I'm going to transfer it again here just to show you how it works onto an old print block that I have. So just ignore the penguin on the back here. But what we're going to do, and what I'm going to have you do, is set down. I need to do this part, so you're going to bring it to me at my desk, but you're going to set your linoleum block down where you want it. Now again, I already mentioned that the paper is a little bit bigger than your linoleum, and that's okay, but you need to set the linoleum down where you think is going to be best to show everything that you want to show from your drawing. So I'm going to set it down right here, and then what I will do is turn it over, and I will be right back because I forgot to bring a ruler. So what I'll do is I'll take a metal ruler, and I'm just going to apply some pressure and slide it over your entire drawing. And this didn't show up perfectly because I messed up the pressure a little bit, but one thing that you can do is go back and draw on the linoleum if you need to, if you lose any details. Hopefully the transfer will turn out a little better than mine did. But you can see, for the most part, we can see where my pencil outlines were, where my details were, and for the most part, areas that I shaded black on the paper. If you wish, at this point, if it'll be easier for you, and again, if we go back and remember the Bill Fick video, you can also use black Sharpie to block out the areas that you don't want to cut, to help remind yourself not to cut them. Now that's okay too. This is a little more time consuming, but if you didn't shade your drawing very well, or you would feel better having black instead of just gray pencil outline to remind you not to cut, feel free to use a Sharpie at this point and block out everything that you are going to leave flat on the print block. So once that is finished, the next step would be cutting your linoleum. So let me grab a linoleum cutting tool and we'll talk about that. Alright, so what I have here is a linoleum cutting tool, and then I have some cutting tips. I'm going to show you how the tool works and how to put the tips in. But let me preface it just by saying that these tips are very sharp. So at all times, you should be cutting away from your opposite hand. So for instance, if I'm right-handed, I should never be cutting towards my left hand. I should also never be cutting back towards my own body. These tips are sharp. They will cut you if you're not careful. So please, always make sure that you're being safe. There are 5 different tip sizes, and I'll kind of go into that in just a minute. I'm going to zoom in a little so you can see what's going on inside the tool. Oh, come on, focus, don't fail me. Got to zoom out a little bit. Alright, so the tip of the tool actually unscrews. So you're going to want to unscrew it a little bit. And actually, I'll take it apart to show you what's in here. If you ever unscrew it this far, something's gone wrong. You never really need to take the top off of the tool. But I'm going to take it apart to show you what's inside. Inside of the tool are 2 pieces of metal. So there's kind of a ball. There's a thick sort of half circle on one side of the ball that's attached. And then there's a skinnier piece that comes off, and if you look at it from the top, you can see the skinny half circle and the thicker half circle, and there's a little bit of a gap there, and that's actually where our cutting tip is going to go. If at any point you unscrew one of these all the way and it falls apart, please just let me know if you can't find the pieces. Every year somebody takes one of these apart and they're too scared to come tell me, so that we can find the missing part so that it's still a usable cutting tool. If either one of the things in the inside of the top gets lost, well, then it doesn't really work anymore. So please, don't be afraid to tell me. We'll find the part. Everything's going to be okay. Now back to what I was saying. We're going to take this We're going to unscrew it part of the way so that the two pieces are loose in there and that they rattle a little bit. Then we take our cutting tip. Now most of the cutting tools you can see on one side is a round, non-sharpened end, and that's the part that's going to go inside the tool. On this side is the sharp end. We're going to put the round, non-sharpened end in between the ball in the center and the skinnier of the two metal pieces. So it's going to slide in, and if you find, like I am right now, that it's not going in, just carefully adjust it. Always hold the tip by this flared part in the middle because that's not sharp and you won't cut yourself on it. Once it's in, you want to push it down until the flared part hits the top of the cutting tool because that keeps it from going in any further. And once that happens, you can screw the top down tight again, and this will keep the tip from coming out. So this is the number 1 tip. This is the smallest one. You can get pretty close to a pencil outline in thickness with this. Tiny, tiny details are going to be tough, so keep that in mind as you're drawing. So the tip sizes range from a number 2, which you can see has kind of a V shape at the bottom. It's a little bit wider than the number 1. That's the bell. You are not dismissed, however. You need to finish watching this video. Here's a number 3 tip. Again, V-shaped, a little bit rounder on the bottom, a little bit wider. That's going to be for a little bit bigger lines. Number 4 tip has a square bottom, and you can see it's pretty wide in comparison to the last 2 that we looked at. This is good for taking out larger, thicker lines or sections of your print block. And then this is a number 5. I don't think many people are going to need a number 5 for this project just because we're working with such a small piece of linoleum. If you feel like you have enough white space to warrant using one, feel free. Just remember, the number 5, it's a little trickier to tell. The cutting edge of the cutting tip is flat, and the safe edge, which goes into your tool, is round.
Please join us for a moment of silence.
I'm going to pause here while the announcements are going. Okay, we're back. So again, just briefly to recap, flat end is the sharp end, rounded end is the one that goes in the tool. You can touch the rounded end, don't touch the sharp end. Okay. I'm going to zoom out again here. Kind of show you how these cutting tools work. Now again, you already saw Bill Fick using it in the video, so you probably have some familiarity with it. I'm just going to show you in some white area of my print the difference between a number 1 cutting tip and some of the larger sizes. To cut, if you look at this from the side, you can see that the cutting tip bends forward slightly near the front end where the business end of the cutting tip. You want it to sit mostly like that. You can see the angle that I have the tool at. It's just kind of gliding across the linoleum. You don't want to take too steep an angle or you're going to stab into the linoleum or stab through the linoleum. If you ever find that you're having to like rip the tool out when you're done making a cut, you're cutting way too deep. So remember, keep a very shallow angle, tilt forward just a little bit, and then start cutting. So you can see I can get a pretty thin line here with a number 1 cutting tip. And I almost describe it as scooping. You're almost scooping pieces of linoleum out of the print block rather than cutting. So that's a number 1. It'll give you pretty thin lines. It'll be good for small details. And when I show you my block that I'm working on, I used the number 1 to do my white lines here in the shaded area of the wolf. As you can imagine, other tips make slightly larger lines. I'll show you what a number 3 does. Number 3 will give you a slightly larger ribbon of linoleum. And then, as I said, a number 5 is a bit larger. One thing to make note of, as I'm cutting, I'm keeping my left hand, my off hand is holding the print block down at the bottom, and then I'm using the cutting tool to cut away from myself. Now, a number 5, again, is great for cutting out large areas of linoleum. I would not want to use it on the face of the wolf or in the tail. I'm only going to use it in spots where I know I need to cut a lot out to make something white. So use the right tip for the job. Don't try to use a 4 or a 5 to cut details in the face of your animal and then complain later that, oh, I can't see anything in his face. A couple other things that I haven't mentioned. If you have a curved line that you need to cut, let's just say that I don't have the butt of my wolf shaded. You can use your offhand to turn the print block as you're cutting so that you don't have to go around the bend and then start cutting towards your fingers, because we don't want to do that. And then one last thing is, anything that you drew on the linoleum isn't going to make a difference when you print it. The key is cutting. If you don't cut something, it's not going to show up. So anything that you want to show when you print, you either have to cut that object or that part of the animal, or you need to cut something next to it for it to show up. Oh, and I know I said we were moving on to printing, but I forgot one thing. I know you're shocked, Mr. B forgot something. You do not need to cut very deep on these. It doesn't really matter if you do cut deeply into the linoleum, but you don't want to get to the point where you're seeing the table on the other side of your cuts. As long as you cut it, it's probably going to show up when you print it. So the depth doesn't really matter as long as you're cutting the linoleum so that it's, you know, cut into the block enough that ink isn't going to stick to anything. So don't feel like you need to cut really deep. A shallow cut will work just as well as a deep one. So it's the end of class and you probably just heard me say, it's time to clean up. What we need to do at this point is get all these linoleum scraps into the trash. What I would recommend, I have these little pieces of plexiglass. All you need to do, we'll move these around the table with ease. If you try to just roll them with your hand, they tend to stick. So just use a piece of plexiglass, move all of your scraps into a pile, and then I'll just come around and scrape them into a garbage can. But if you guys can use a little piece of plexi to just pile everything up so I can take one swipe at it and put it in the trash, that would be great. That's all we need to do at cleanup. Just make sure these end up in the garbage and not all over the floor like confetti after a parade.